Whenever I'm in the mood for some classic flight simming, well, there's plenty to choose from when it comes to combat sims. Whether it's the wide selection of aircraft in Birds of Prey, the awesome aerial antics of Red Baron, the camel detonating choppers of LHX, or the Mach speed dogfighting of Falcon 4.0. But when it comes to civilian aircraft, I think Microsoft Flight Simulator. And specifically, I think of the first entry I ever had from the series, Flight Simulator version 4.0 from 1989, published by Microsoft Corporation with development led by BAO Limited. With BAO standing for Bruce Artwick Organization, a development studio led by the one and only Bruce Artwick, original designer of Flight Simulator and co-founder of the Sublogic Corporation. After Mr. Artwick left Sublogic in 1988, Microsoft Flight Simulator development moved over to BAO, with Flight Sim 4.0 here being the first entry in the series not to be developed under Sublogic. At this point, the Flight Simulator series wasn't owned by Microsoft, it was owned by Bruce Artwick. So up until they acquired the IP in 1995, wherever he went, Microsoft followed. And where he went was the fourth major release of Microsoft Flight Simulator for IBM PCs and compatibles, little more than a year after the release of version 3.0. Confusingly, at the time, Microsoft didn't clearly label the different releases of Flight Simulator, with each new release simply being titled Microsoft Flight Simulator with a little blurb advertising itself as a new version on the front of the box. So, unless you already knew which piece of cover art belonged to which version, you'd have to look around back for this tiny version number to know for sure which was which. Or just take a look at the new features list and compare it to previous versions you might be familiar with, because in addition to an improved flight model and 100 million square miles of Earth to explore, version 4.0 added things like sailplanes, randomized weather, dynamic scenery, an aircraft designer, approach lighting systems, text-based air traffic control, and performance enhancements for Intel 386 PCs. Lying within this original MS-DOS release are an assortment of goodies, packed within your bog-standard serious business Microsoft packaging of the time, starting with this product registration card and license agreement sleeve, the latter of which can be unsealed to reveal the two 360K 5¼ floppy disks, containing the main program and default scenery. Neither of these are copy protected either, thankfully, so installation is as simple as copying the files over to your hard drive from the command prompt. Next is an advertisement for Andrew Tobias's Managing Your Money software for DOS, an amusing example of the kind of customer Microsoft Flight Simulator might have attracted. Then there's this hard-to-read sheet of paper offering 5 Metropolitan navigation charts for the cost of shipping and handling, something I'd love to have, but so far I've never come across them in their original form. And then there's the all-important quick reference card, detailing the simulator's many controls, hotkeys, and shortcuts. Finally, there's the magnificent information manual and flight handbook, boasting 203 pages of Microsoft simulated flying information in a handy handbook, an essential companion to the program if you really want to get the most out of its feature set. Flight Simulator 4.0 is absolutely chock full of deeply customizable options, flight modes, maps, scenery, weather models, and more, and a majority of it isn't explained in the program itself, or is presented with such idiosyncrasy that you'll spend ages stumbling around in the dark without this manual. It also features these lovely illustrations before each new chapter, drawn in the same style as the awesome artwork on the front of the box. Ah, I love these. I wish I had access to larger color versions of them, or even knew who the artist was responsible for them, because yeah, these are excellent desktop wallpaper or frameable poster material, and it does a great job of enhancing the detail of the simulation while also capturing the surreal nature of this computerized world. Anyway, yeah, Flight Sim 4. Once installed, the program begins with a series of configuration questions regarding CPU type, graphics options, dynamic scenery, weather, clock settings, keyboard layout, and so on. It's a lot to choose from, but thankfully it saves your options to a batch file to accelerate future startups. And with that out of the way, you're dropped into flight mode, sitting on the legendary runway at Meigs Field in Chicago, Illinois, right on the edge of Lake Michigan on Northerly Island. This was the default starting airport in Microsoft Flight Simulator for decades until the strip's unscrupulous destruction in 2003, and version 4.0 happily continues the tradition. Here you begin seated in the cockpit of a Cessna Skylane RG-2, a variant of the popular 182 series with retractable landing gear, with its engine primed and ready for takeoff. Gently nudging forward on the throttle will begin to move the aircraft on the runway, and applying full throttle will soon bring the plane to takeoff speed, 75 knots in this case. Pull back on the control yoke to pitch the nose up, and there we go, folks. We are now airborne. Please sit back, relax, and enjoy the flight. So, now what? Well, I don't know, whatever, man. It's Flight Simulator, and the primary goal is to fly for the love of flying. Aviation for aviation's sake. It's a beautiful thing. In terms of inputs, Flight Sim 4 uses the keyboard by default, and it's actually fully controllable using nothing but that. Although it's not ideal being a digital input method, so mouse and joystick support are naturally available for analog controls. The mouse can toggle between operating menus and flying the plane by pressing the right mouse button, and up to 2 joysticks can be used at once, providing you have a game port configuration that supports it. And if you were fortunate enough to have a full HOTAS setup with separate throttle and pedals, it can take advantage of those too. So, assuming everything's all calibrated, traditionally there are always 3 steps to my maiden voyage. 1. Take off from Meigs Field. 2. Fly towards the loop. 3. Crash into something. And as far as the earlier Microsoft Flight Simulators go, that's about the most universal experience you can have right there. Half of my FS4 memories consist of me and my childhood friends hanging out in front of the computer, farting around over a blue-skied Chicago, seeing how high we could climb, how fast we could fly, and how spectacular of a crash we could pull off. Not that any of the crashes were particularly spectacular in a visual sense. The non-combat flight sims have never offered much in terms of visible destruction. But it was thrilling to virtually fly over approximations of real-life cities at all. Whether with the keyboard and mouse, or using the plasticky little Craft Thunderstick I had back then. And the experience changed drastically depending on which of the 3 main aircraft you're piloting. In addition to the Cessna, the Gates Learjet 25G offers up much greater speed, fuel capacity, and a higher service ceiling. And the Schweitzer 232 sailplane provides a unique set of challenges, being an unpowered glider boasting a nearly 57-foot wingspan that glides around on currents of air. Since it can't take off on its own, your options are to fly another plane to an appropriate height and swap it out, use slew mode to just float up in the air and begin gliding from there once you return control settings to normal, or load up one of the included sailplane modes that starts off in mid-air so you can begin falling with style. On the topic of built-in flight modes, the others it comes with are quite helpful for trying out FS4's most notable locations. Feeling up for a tour of downtown New York City? Here you go! Want to try your hand at thermal soaring? This mode here is where it's at. Or how about a bare-knuckled landing attempt on a Nimitz-class aircraft carrier? Yeah, look no further. These flight modes have got you covered. Otherwise, loading a specific location is accomplished by typing in a bunch of numbers from the coordinates listings printed in the manual, which is not only tedious, but the results are often underwhelming. A majority of the airports and cities are barely populated with anything at all, and the few that are sparsely populated with only a handful of handcrafted building models. If your goal is sightseeing, then most of the map isn't really worth exploring here. Like, yeah, you can fly into Canada, Mexico, and the Caribbean, but it looks about the same as basically everywhere else. But as a youngin', none of that mattered, and if you've still got the imagination for it, Flight Simulator 4.0 is still quite capable in delivering a feeling of wonder. Flying from Chicago to New York City to San Francisco and literally anywhere in between, it's impressive stuff despite the limitations. Especially the fact that the sim can also run in real time in sync with your computer's clock, and generate wind, clouds, and weather systems to complicate things on the fly. Traveling through intense thunderstorms and dealing with turbulence in a tiny Cessna is one of those computery memories that's thoroughly scorched itself into my brain. It's always a harrowing experience with all those threatening low cloud formations and lightning strikes occurring. You can even generate your own dubious conditions using the dynamic weather generator and choose your own cloud types and other atmospheric conditions at varying altitudes and times of day, bringing together multiple types of geekdom: weather nerds, aviation nerds, computer nerds, all interested in the simulation for different but equally valid reasons. You love to see it. And if you grow tired of simply flying around for the sense of adventure, the entertainment section makes a return from version 3.0, offering up formation flying, crop dusting, EFIS CFPD, World War I ACE, and even multiplayer modes. But personally, the most interesting of those has always been World War I ACE and multiplayer. Flying in formation and dusting crops is a fine enough distraction, and it's admittedly nice to have another plane in the sky to follow around and have some points to earn for covering fields with spray. But neither mode holds my attention for long before I have the urge to return to something more freeform. And the electronic flight instrument system / command flight path display mode is pretty much just a way to practice using the instrument landing system, with preset approach paths visualized by floating road strips in the sky, leading the way downwards. But then there's World War I, which drops you into the cockpit of the legendary Sopwith Camel, armed with 5 bombs and 1,000 rounds in the machine gun. This is by far the most game-like aspect of the whole simulator, where the objective is to use your weaponry to take out enemy aircraft, factories, and fuel depots. The better you do, the higher you score. Simple stuff, and nowhere near as fleshed out as a proper combat flight sim, but nonetheless a fascinating addition to mess around with from time to time. Same can be said for the multiplayer, which is something I've honestly never tried until making this video. It requires either dialing into another player's computer using a phone line and a modem, or connecting 2 systems together locally using a null modem serial cable. 2 or more players can then choose a plane and starting location, sync up their environments, and fly around the map together. Yeah, the whole map, from sea to shining sea. Something I wish I'd have had the pleasure of experiencing back in the day, because, this is pretty impressive even now. Instead, what really devoured my time in Flight Sim 4 back then is the Experimental Aircraft Designer. This mode lets you customize your own prop plane, glider, or fixed-wing tactical jet, including performance, components, and paint jobs. Man, I went completely nuts when I discovered this. Change the wings, fuel capacity, center of gravity, dry weight, tail and stabilizer size, and even the color of 10 different parts of the plane. Did any of this actually result in a flyable aircraft? Almost never, no. But who cared? Making a mechanical monstrosity was mountains of fun. The fact that Flight Sim 4 had customizable planes in addition to a wide open world to explore, the impact this had on me and my simulation preferences going forward cannot be overstated. Back when I first got my hands on this, it felt like a program from the future with unfathomable scope and detail, like it was genuinely endless. Even though it genuinely wasn't. 100 million square miles to explore only goes so far when 99% of those miles are devoid of anything beyond a few lines, dots, and rectangles, wide open swaths of green, yellow, blue, and gray as far as the eye can see, with little more than your plane's navigation systems to distinguish one location from another, unless it's a major city. Other than the meager downtown skylines, its best locations are the airports themselves, featuring dynamically generated fuel trucks and AI-piloted planes. But even then, most of the Sim's 118 airports are sparingly modeled, if at all, consisting only of line art indicating runways and buildings. Now, Flight Sim 4 didn't even have any real sound effects, beyond the shrill PC speaker beeping away in a painful attempt to imitate engine noise, stall warnings, and collisions. So just have fun for what it is. Flying around the virtual environment, soaking in all the flat-shaded polygonal sights, and admiring your simulated 3D airplane with its nifty animated control surfaces and bright blue paint job. Well, if you're running the program in color anyway. I've been using the enhanced VGA mode at 640 by 350 resolution with 16 colors, since that's what I was used to seeing as a kid on my Packard Bell 486. But as shown earlier, FS4 can be run using an impressive array of other graphics modes, ranging from Hercules Monochrome, 4-color CGA, 16-color Composite CGA, EGA and Tandy 16 colors, and even a lower res 256-color mode. Which one to choose depends not only on your graphics card and display, but the CPU you're using, with the simulation being designed to take advantage of the latest i386 equipped systems of the late 80s. Systems like my 16MHz NCR Compton PC386SX running a 386SX as indicated by the straightforward model name. More or less exactly what Flight Simulator 4.0 was designed to work with. As such, the performance would have looked more like this running in higher res VGA mode. Yeah, quite a bit slower indeed. You'll note that the clock on the instrument panel is still running at the correct speed though, regardless of the frame rate. Thankfully, unlike certain other pieces of software running on anything faster than the 386, the simulation is not tied to the frame rate. This means you can push things pretty far forward in terms of hardware and still get a solid experience. And that's great, because after its initial 1989 release, Flight Simulator 4.0 received a crapload more content in the years to come. First up was Microsoft's Aircraft and Scenery Designer, an official FS4 expansion pack adding new handcrafted scenery, an expanded aircraft designer with more planes to customize, and 4 new aircraft: the Piper Archer, Beechcraft Starship, Boeing 747-400, and the Cessna 182 seaplane. But as awesome as new planes were, the standout feature here is the Scenery Designer, accessed from within the Mode menu. For the first time, users could modify the scenery files from within the sim itself using a fantastically capable editing package. Build your own airports, roads, waterways, towns, mountains, cities, whatever you can think of using the included objects. Want to litter the runway with random cars providing an additional hurdle to overcome during takeoff? Have at it! Or perhaps flesh out the lower Manhattan skyline with gargantuan mountains? You can do that too. With full control over individual static and dynamic scenery items, polygons, and more, there wasn't much limiting you from creating an entire world all your own with enough time and skill. This lit a fire under the flight simming community, spurring the creation of countless user-made scenery files distributed on bulletin board systems and early websites, along with opening up the floodgates for third-party developers to create and sell their own add-on packs, a business that remains popular in the flight sim world today. There were even third-party scenery expansions to the scenery expansion, like the Scenery Enhancement Editor from Mallard Software, which added hundreds more objects and scenery items to be used in conjunction with the official editor. And if rolling your own scenery wasn't appealing, Flight Sim 4 remained compatible with older Sublogic scenery discs, consisting of scenery packs for Europe and Japan, along with a dozen more packs covering the United States. All 12 US packs were later released under the USA East and USA West packs, and other companies like Mallard and Microscene got in on the action as well, each selling their own scenery add-ons. Outside of simple scenery, one of the more fascinating third-party add-ons is Mallard's Real Weather Pilot from 1993. This lets you dial into the direct user access terminal weather service and download real-time weather data to be used within Flight Simulator. Now, this reliance on dial-up servers means it no longer works as it would have back in '93, but still, talk about ahead of its time in terms of functionality. And finally, the last thing I want to mention is the Sound Graphics and Aircraft Upgrade Pack, also by Mallard. This brought Flight Simulator 4 kicking and screaming into the 90s with things like sound card support and an array of digital PCM sound effects, higher res graphics modes, and 4 new planes: the 1939 Laird Turner Meteor, Spectrum RX 550 Ultralight, P-51D Mustang, and the legendary Concorde SST. Not only that, but if you had a capable enough graphics card, the SGA Upgrade Pack provided an 800x600 resolution SVGA graphics mode, which looks utterly phenomenal. Or about as phenomenal as pointy polygons and line art instrument panels can get anyway. And that's Microsoft Flight Simulator version 4.0. I know I've said it 100 different ways by this point, but for its time, this sim was massive. From 1989 to 1993, no other civilian flight sim came close to doing what Flight Simulator 4 did. In terms of being able to explore such massive chunks of planet Earth and customize everything from the aircraft to the weather, landscape, and cities themselves, FS4 was in a league of its own. And going back to revisit it once again remains oddly inspiring, even decades later. And if you enjoyed this retrospective look back at an MS-DOS thing, then you're on the right channel. I upload videos on a wide variety of vintage computer topics each week right here on LGR, so check out my other work or stick around for more. And as always, thank you for watching.